Part 2. Mortality's Remains. I have this fear, and I suspect most people do. It's a fear of being exposed for what I really am under all these clothes, absolutely naked. I'm wearing nothing at all that I wasn't born with, grew up with, nothing spectacular at all. And under all this hair, I am totally bald. And the older I get, the more I'm afraid my skin and bone and flesh and blood are not as fashionable as they used to be. I've been swathed in experience, steeped in this earth's atmosphere for so long, I've become something of a used product, no longer on the prime market. Let's face it, I'm a decomposing mass of lingering birthmarks, aging blemishes along with occasional symptoms of inner turbulence and outer accident, more and more dreadfully conscious that my mortality is diminishing myself to redundancy, especially in the onrush of so many fresher fleshling cells who assume now what I assumed then, that my nakedness is a condition to be delighted in, or at least to be overcome with a healthy diet, regular exercise, or a forceful attitude, or a vibrantly sloppy, egotistical disregard for anybody else's opinion. And is it a fear of being looked at, or not being looked at? Being touched or remaining untouched except by the most crudely clinical of hands? At what point did the outside world begin to violatingly threaten my outer sacrament and inner sanctum with indifference, pity, or repulsion? Where does my precious self begin and a disparaging outside world end? Is there really some inviolable rock at the core of my being that cannot and must not ever be seen or touched, lest it crumble humiliatingly into dust? Of course it's going to crumble into dust anyway, naturalistically speaking, assuming I'm a natural being and not some alien creature who may really only be functional on another planet, in another space, in which case I may as well be singing the Banana Boat song in Swahili for all I may be communicating to an outside world. But since I feel I'm still alive and terribly human, I can't help wondering what the key is, where the key is. If there is a key to unlocking some transcendent primality, beyond all this festering duality and multiplicity, of a place where all becomes one, and my inner sanctified rock is as porous and as fertile as the moment I was first conceived. It will be, it already is, it has become eternally filled of its own flow. Enlightenment, cosmic composure, the utter fearlessness of pure tranquility, a sexlessly unperturbable, doubtlessly inviolable, supremely unsensuous disowning of the self, a deathless drowning in this unstoppable, irrepressible energy of the universe, a purely active repose that can soothe this world's restless heart, my heart, still its aching brain, my brain, and smooth its wrinkled brow, my wrinkled brow, till the great good God force itself may be convinced that even the work of creation must take a time out every now and then. I like me dad. He was me dad. Can't say I really knew the man, but he was still me dad. Must be tough if you can't even like the guy who fizzled you out of his lines and popped your food and shelter for the next 18 years. One of the only two people I'd taken for granted all my life, my mum and dad. And I'd like to include my older brother, who's obviously been around since I was born. The truth be told, I'd never applied to him for a grant. We were obviously never as close as I once liked to think we were. Till that afternoon he left me alone at the bus stop, went off with his mates and never saw him again, except when he came back from meals, which we always ate separately, reading comic books or watching telly. The whole family ate separately, reading comic books or watching television. My dad worked shifts at the glass factory, sometimes double time, so we never knew when he was going to be around or not. Before we were teenagers, we did try the Sunday family dinner, sitting round the kitchen table, awkwardly discussing the news of the world, but by post-puberty we'd let that one go. And my dad had started his Sunday lunchtime ritual down at the Smallthorne Club, having a few pints with his mates, so nobody wanted to wait for him to get back from the pub by 2 3 o'clock, everybody vanished. Left me dad to eat his Yorkshire pudding in peace, because he could get a little testy when he was toasted. We'd stay out of his way till he'd had his after-dinner nap. By then it was time for Sunday night at the London Palladium, and nobody wanted to start an argument, while Bruce Forsyth was trying to beat his clock on national television. I'm not sure my brother even liked me, Dad. In frequent sibling gatherings, he'd always finish up scuttling him as a mean-spirited, miserable bugger with a vicious streak, a petty tyrant who would one day get his comeuppance. I think I must have missed something when we were kids. Apparently, my brother took most of me dad's heat, actually felt the belt. I just felt its threat, because he could be a scary bastard. But I always figured, hey, that's what dads are. That's what dad's supposed to. I mean, you work all hours of the day and night in a factory, come home to 3 kids. I mean, this is just what dads are like. And mums are not like that. Mums are always a bit of a pushover, because they don't do anything all day. Just cook meals and vacuum, sip lemon water and read women's magazines. It was the dad who threatened with the belt and told you to get your hair cut, you look like a girl. Mums just suggested things. Oh, you look so much nicer with your top button fastened. Tuck your shirt in. If things seemed to be getting seriously out of control, she'd always threaten to tell me, Dad, I'm going to tell your dad. Because he could be a tough, scary bugger. Apparently, he volunteered to join the Navy when he was 17 years old, lied about his age, because he wanted to fight for his country in World War II. I didn't know this till the vicar mentioned it at his funeral. Truth or legend, it sounds good if you want to boost somebody's posthumous morale, but I'm not convinced he was so much taking pride in his heritage as trying to get out from under the shadow of his own dad, me bald-headed ex-pig-slaughtering granddad, most definitely a mean-spirited bugger with a vicious streak. Docked his kids down in a wage slave slum and told them to just bloody get on with it. I was like a big babby. Sorry, Dad, Grandad. Well, I am 2 years old. Either way, it was me dad's big chance to see the world from the deck of an aircraft carrier. The HMS Indomitable, Inscrutable, Indescribable, well, something like that. I remember poring wondrously through his souvenir war photographs. Him in his sailor suit with his best shipmate Shorty, who seemed to be a bit taller than he was. The harbour at Singapore, very exotic, lots of junks. Crossing the equator for the first time, all these able-bodied seamen dressed up as painted ladies being dunked into a big tin tub of water. It's a man's life in the Navy, at least when you're crossing the equator for the first time. But my favourite was this wreckage of a kamikaze pilot. Crashed his plane into the top deck, sent himself up in flames to ensure that his rising sun never set and his kith and kinfolk got a bigger plate of sushi. Kamikaze. The very words send a frisson up the undeveloped spine. The suicide mission. The ultimate warrior creed. I mean, I've seen these Japanese guys in the comic books with their big owl goggles and their banzai teeth. Kamikaze. Talk about having your brainwashed. These guys must have had their whole being deep steam cleaned. I mean, the English Tommy would go over the top when ordered to on pain of death, but you always assumed they hoped beyond hope they'd survive the battle. But these nefarious Nipponese, they let go of all hope and still dared to enter that crash landing like it was the gateway to paradise, through a furnace of fire and smoke, molten metal, and hopefully a lot of mutilated, mangled enemy bodies. Destroy the enemy at all costs. But who made the enemy the enemy? Obviously the enemy did, because in a war everybody is somebody's enemy. There are 2 sides of equal value in every equation, and the good guys can never win, because after the war everybody's done something bad, if only condoned it, encouraged it, or conscientiously objected to it, in which case the whole country's your enemy, as well as the other enemy. Sometimes we just have to fight for what's ours, even if what's ours very often used to be theirs, and what belongs to everybody just won't stand up in a court of law. Otherwise we'd all be part of the same equation. X can't equal Y, unless Y becomes X. But why would Y want to become X, if not to eliminate the equal sign altogether? And what about all them A's through W's? Collateral damage. Not to mention that poor Z dangling at the end like some participle can't even define its own subject. I've always felt a great affinity for the Z at the end of the alphabet. and still not sure why X should mark the spots any more than a good P. It's a mystery to me. And to Albert Einstein. Apparently, those were his last words on his deathbed. Didn't proffer up any revelatory equation, just a shrug of enlightened incomprehensibility. Well, it's a mystery to me. Genius obviously has its limitations. Besides, the last time I gave the world a good equation, it landed with a big bang on top of Hiroshima. Sometimes I think we're all on a suicide mission, seeking something more glorious to die for than mere physical degeneration. I mean, them kamikazes, at least they passed into eternity with their muscles still rippling. It could be argued that Jesus committed suicide. All he had to do was deny he was the Son of God. I'm just kidding, Mr. Pilate, Sir Pontius. Just having a laugh. I was being metaphorical, because in truth we're all the sons of God, except for the daughters and the sons of Allah, a different God altogether. Must be, otherwise what's the fuss all about? God, by any other name, would still rule over everything. Otherwise, doesn't deserve the name. May as well just call him King Reggie, ruler of all the lands north of the Mississippi, or south of the Mississippi, depends which direction he invades from. Jesus, life gets complicated once you start elaborating on its basics. And speaking of Jesus with a gun or a grenade in your hand, it doesn't seem much of a recipe for peace on earth. Anyway, back from the war, what's a poor fella to do but try to settle down in peace, get a job, get married, start a family? Jesus, I made a baby. I must be a man and should put childish things behind me, sell me accordion and behave accordionlessly. Work my way to the top. I'll become a leader of men. Barry Fairclough, Jackie Carr, Ernie Sidebottom. They'd follow me to the ends of a pop bottle. I think I mentioned he worked in a glass factory. And so my dad did. He eventually shifted away from shift work to salaried management, troubleshooter on call 24/7. So we still never knew when he was going to be around or not. I wonder at what point did he realize he was not destined for greatness, on any terms the mediated world might recognize. I wonder at what point did I realize I wasn't destined for greatness. Yesterday afternoon, this guy flipped me the finger for cutting him off at an intersection. Like it was just anybody, some random idiot who really ought to be more aware of his fellow human beings. I should really keep in touch with the rankling file of humanity, which persistently insists on treating me just like one of their own. But he did good, me dad. He did okay. He kind of kept his shit together to the end. I remember only one time when the familiar nucleus really seemed to be flying off its hinges. I was too young to remember any details, but there's a lot of screaming and shouting, which finished up with me dad locking me mum outside in the backyard in the dark. And when he finally allowed her back in, she was in tears, and I'd never seen me mum cry before. It can break a little kid's heart. I guess things were sorted out somehow, but it must have left its scars. And in hindsight, I reflect maybe this is the moment I realized I wasn't meant to follow in my dad's footsteps. Not if this is where they led. I wasn't meant to join the Navy, fight for my country in a war, get married, work in a factory, start a family. I needed to follow very different cultural imperatives. So maybe I'm in denial. Strange thing about denial. You could be in denial, you're in denial, or in denial, you're not in denial. There's no denying there are some things you might prefer to forget. The fear, the dread, the darkness, the violence. But if they were real then, they must still be real now. And consigning them to the past, only mum and dad's fault, is a bit like blaming your left foot for not being on your right leg, or expecting a time machine to solve all your problems. Besides, unless it's also a space machine, you never know where you might finish up on. Always back where you started. So you really got to do your homework. Make sure you don't start out at the bottom of the ocean or in the middle of a big bang. Otherwise, you could be travelling around forever, too scared to ever set foot outside. So you definitely need a full tank of gas or ether or vegetable oil, whatever fuel time runs on. It can't be natural energy, which doesn't seem geared for never growing old and dying. So you really have to think synthetic to know when you've really arrived somewhere else And it's not just here and now, because you can't be in two places at the same time. You'd need a machine involving elements of schizophrenia and split personality. Where's Charlie? He's in the Middle Ages. Well, you should be back by Thursday. It's already Thursday. Hey, time flies when you're travelling through it. Besides, aren't I, Charlie? Doesn't it just blow the corpuscles off your blood vessels when somebody tells you, we're going to get it right this time? With the benefit of hindsight, we now have perfect foresight. We've got a time machine to tell us where we went wrong last time. And everybody is so excited by it. Absolutely everybody, the whole world. Except for the ones who've never heard of it, don't listen to the news. Which planet are you living on? You could wake up one morning and everybody's disappeared and you'll be wondering why you weren't invited. Well, you didn't listen to the news. NPR would have told you. We're all in a little Viennese bistro, circa 1937, schmoozing on some authentic Bohemian Rhapsody. Der Wiener Schnitzel ist wonderful. Die Schnaps out of this Welt, trust me. This is an experience you will not want to miss. And a bite of that Apfelstrudel, you will think you're in heaven, when really you're in Nazi Germany. But sometimes we just have to step out of history and appreciate the here and now simply for what it is, an opportunity for fine dining. So NPR has arranged a very special evening for its members. For a small donation of a few $1,000s, you can experience some of the finest cuisine in the Third Reich. For a few million more, you can actually dine with the Führer himself, Adolf Hitler, who I'm told, apart from his politics, is one of the most scintillating after-dinner speakers in the Western civilized world. Just don't mention the Jews, he'll keep you in stitches all night. So call us now and make your reservation, because I'm told tickets are selling like hot blitzkriegel. If you've ever wondered what happened to all them frontier snake oil salesmen, they're still out there. Still hawking their placebos, just waiting to pick your pocket and convince you it's a magic show.